I'm Oxnard Police Chief Jason Benitez, and this is an appointment item for the September 5th, 2023 City Council meeting concerning a report to the City Council on a police department update. The recommendation is that the City Council receive a report from the police chief on a variety of current public safety related topics. First off, I would like to bring to the public's attention a reminder of the City Council priorities, two of which pertain directly to the police department. One being to maintain 911 emergency response times, as well as to restore community policing. Within the police department, we have our own department priorities, which also include promoting community safety, promoting community engagement, and maintaining a culture of success within the organization. To start this report, I'd like to take a moment and talk a little bit about crime in Oxnard. This is the 30-year crime trend of reported crimes in the city of Oxnard. These are reported through the Department of Justice's Uniform Crime Reporting System, which has been in place for several decades. The year 2022 witnessed a 7.81% increase from 2021. However, when you look at the overall picture of reported crime in Oxnard, 2022, despite the increase, was the third lowest year during the past 30 years in our city. Many have asked how our crime rates compare to that of the state of California. Now, crime rates refer to the incidence of crimes based on a population. In this case, the rate is number of crimes per 100,000 population. So in looking at this for the year 2022, Oxnard is actually lower in terms of both violent and property crime in the state. This also means that in total, the crime rates in Oxnard are lower than that of the average rates in California. Within the police department, we have a number of challenges that we have been historically grappling with, and they are recruiting, hiring, and retention. I'll talk a little bit about that later in the presentation. Dealing with supply chain issues, particularly with vehicles and other equipment, but in terms of vehicles, we have had a number of delayed deliveries on patrol vehicles. It's been nearly 3 years since we have taken delivery of patrol vehicles, and our fleet is actually beginning to experience the impacts of that. Radio infrastructure. Our city has an aged or antiquated radio communications infrastructure. We're currently working on a plan to improve that within the next several months, and we're hoping to report back to the council the progress that we made later this year. Technology support. In law enforcement, we are constantly faced with dealing with IT and management of information issues, and this has been no stranger to us for some time. Maintaining response times is generally a function of available staffing as well as available officer time. And when we talk a little bit more about the staffings, that will give some insight as to how this does have an impact on response times. So I'd like to start off by talking about officer contacts with emotionally disturbed persons, which appears to be increasing in its frequency. This means that officers are encountering persons who are either in crisis or under the influence of some type of controlled substance. And what they're seeing are more volatile and aggressive behavior from the persons that they contact, many of which are not only acting in this manner, but they're also armed with some type of weapon or dangerous item. So this could be a knife, it could be a bat, it could be a stick, it could be a metal pipe, it could be a piece of glass or a stone or something else that presents a hazard to the officer and the public that surrounds them. As a result, our officers have to be especially increasingly more mindful of de-escalation techniques that are necessary to bring these events to a peaceful conclusion. So it does note that we have had officer-involved shootings this year. There were 3 during the spring, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that's led to. Given these incidents as the backdrop, I would like to point out that the police department, in conjunction with the city manager's office, has secured the services of the Office of Independent Review Group, also known as the OIR Group. This is a reputable firm that does a number of independent reviews of agencies in terms of critical incidents, as well as policies and practices. In this case, we want to learn from what we have experienced with our previous incidents. And as such, we would like them to take a look at our policies, our procedures, established practices and training related to our officers interacting and encountering emotionally disturbed persons through the course of their duties. What will happen is, upon the completion of their review, a public report will be issued by them and will be available to the public. In the meantime, I would encourage the members of the public seeing this presentation to check the website out for the OIR group, and you can see that they have a large body of high quality work that they've done for a number of government agencies across the state. Overdoses are an increasing trend in our city, as they are a national problem. Last year, over 100,000 people died from opioid overdoses in our country. 2021, we responded to 248 overdose calls. That number continues to rise. By last year, we responded to nearly 300, so 287 overdose calls, of which most were related to opioids. As such, our officers now carry or continue to carry naloxone, which is a nasal spray. It blocks the effects of opioid on cell receptor sites. And as this continues, it can be seen that the number of Narcan administrations just this year up through August are essentially equal to that of all of last year. Staffing is also an ongoing challenge. It's not just an Oxnard issue, but it's something that is persistent across the state and even the nation, things especially during the past few years. A lot of drivers behind this, but I think it's in some, I'll say that it is largely because of the lack of appeal in going into the law enforcement profession due to a number of things that have been happening in our country over the past few years that show a lot more scrutiny and less respect for those that serve. The department is currently staffed at or authorized for 246 sworn positions. And as of August 17th, that number of vacant positions within that authorized number has climbed very quickly to 26. That gives us a 10.1% sworn vacancy rate. It's very important to note that at the end of last year, we were in single digits and we were closing that gap. And we had only 8 vacancies, but over the course of the past several months, we have had a number of separations within our department. When I spoke about response times, what happens when we are faced with this many vacancies is that it usually strains the patrol division staffing. And that in turn has other effects, is that there are less officers. The officer availability time actually goes down. And so that does have some impact on response times. As such, we have doubled up our efforts to run police officer trainees through academy classes. In past years, there were 2 academies in Ventura County at the Ventura County Criminal Justice Training Center, which is run by the Ventura County Sheriff. We are opting to send our trainees to 2 additional academies outside of Ventura County between the Ventura County sessions. So if we had not done this, we would be in a much more difficult position with respect to vacancies. We're experiencing a significant decline in terms of number of police officer applicants that are seeking employment with us. And so this graph here shows the steady decline in the number of police officer applicants since 2017. If you look at 2017 compared to calendar year 2022, you'll see that we have less than 50% of the applicants that we did during that year. Another consideration for police officers as well as dispatchers is the onboarding time. That is the period of time necessary to bring them in from the time of application through the time of training and to the successful completion of their probationary period, which is 1 year from their hire date. Generally takes about 18 months from the application date to being fully in service. So that is a very significant time lag when we do lose an officer for whatever reason, or a dispatcher for that matter as well. Looking at the hired versus separated trends for the past few years, this is something that we keep an eye on here as well. We want to try to keep that blue column higher than the red column every year. And you can see that it's been kind of a mixed result over the past several years. Past year in 2022, we were able to hire about 2 times as many officers that were leaving, so which was a good thing. But this year, that trend seems to have reversed itself, where we're actually losing more officers to from the agency than we've actually hired. So this is a challenge for us. So we took a closer look at those entry-level police officers that separated from the organization within their first year of being hired. This number is based on 36 separations out of 75 entry-level officers that we hired between 2019 and at the end of July of this year. So as you can see in the graph, the academy attrition was about close to 60%. Now, it's not any type of indictment on any of the academy programs, but what this means is that there are actually separations caused by the entry-level police officer failing to meet the requirements of that program, such as failing physical fitness, failing the academic rigors of that academy, or failing some other performance measure or integrity measure of that academy. So that leaves the other 25% that go through field training, and we're seeing about 1 out of 4 of our trainees that we hired during this period of time did not successfully complete field training. This graph actually refers to the overall separation trend from the agency between 2019 and the end of July of this year. And as you can see, service retirements are still the leading form of separation from the agency. A separation retirement is when a person has been vested in the retirement system and is of retirement age, that is old enough to retire and draw a pension. Of note, a little under 9% of these service retirement retirees are now working for another law enforcement agency. And by that, I mean an agency that is outside of the CalPERS system, such as an agency that may be a county agency or an agency that is out of the state of California. In our second largest separation category, it has to do with resignations. And this has a wide variety of different reasons. This could be persons that are no longer desiring to be a part of law enforcement, or they are lateraling to another law enforcement agency, as about 8% of this number has done over the past few years. Shifting gears, every year we receive requests to talk about fireworks and fireworks enforcement, so we'll spend a few minutes on this. As you know, fireworks are illegal in Oxnard, and persons who are in possession of fireworks may be subjected to fines of up to $1,000. There are 2 types of fireworks defined in the Health and Safety Code, the first being safe and sane fireworks. Those are the ones that bear the State Fire Marshal's insignia that you see to the right on the actual item. These are the types of pyrotechnics that are sold at fireworks stands that you see in various counties across California right before the 4th of July holiday. Dangerous fireworks, however, are defined as those fireworks that explode, skip, fly, travel, or dart. And you can see this includes rockets, Roman candles, mortars, M80s, fireworks, firecrackers, those types of devices. We have civil citation codes that are in effect for these types of violations. We use civil citations as they actually require a preponderance of evidence versus beyond reasonable doubt to convict somebody to secure the fine. And there are 2 levels within this section. Possession of safe and sane fireworks garners a $250 fine, whereas possession of dangerous fireworks has a $1,000 fine. People ask, why aren't the fines higher? Well, $1,000 is the maximum fine amount that is allowable by state law. People also ask, why don't we use criminal code sections and arrest people for possessing fireworks? Well, though it is a valid point, the practical application of this is when we arrest people and take them into custody, that takes officers out of service in the field. And that we're talking for periods of time that could be in terms of hours on a busy day, like the 4th of July. In 2018, the city introduced the host liability ordinance for fireworks, which now holds tenants and landlords liable for fireworks activity on their properties, and a number of our citations are issued as such. And it goes without saying, well, that fireworks have a big negative impact on our community. They disturb the personal peace and well-being of members of our community. The effects that it has on people is also very traumatic, and we must be very cognizant that we have people in our community that have health conditions. We have members of our community that are suffering from post-traumatic stress injuries, and so when fireworks are set off near them, it really has a very terrible impact on them. Pets and animals also are highly affected by the noise and the lights and disturbances caused by fireworks. Of course, there's a fire risk. There are usually a number of smaller fires that are put out during the course of the holiday due to fireworks. And of course, injuries and fatalities, which we have witnessed in Oxnard during recent years, mostly are injuries to the hands, the face, and the eyes due to firework explosions. Fireworks have a long list of challenges for us in our communities, is that they're easily obtained. We have a nationwide culture that pretty much has embraced fireworks as part of some of the holidays. Our community is very divided on the issue. We encounter those persons that really believe that fireworks are part of the national culture for our holidays, whereas we have those persons that are negatively impacted by the fireworks or do not like to have people blowing fireworks off near their homes at 2 in the morning. So there are two camps, and usually law enforcement has to deal with both sides. As I mentioned before, fireworks disturb the personal peace of our residents. And when we receive the calls at the police department's dispatch center, the callers are often very angry, and that tone can be heard over the phone when callers are calling in. They're very frustrated. You also do see that in terms of the social media commentary that develops during the 4th of July. Generally, people revert to saying that this is the worst year ever, and they're also very critical of what law enforcement is able to do to address the issue. One thing that we want to emphasize is that in order for an agency or a police officer to enforce fireworks violations, is that they need to be in a position to enforce it, that they need to see it, or they need to have enough information to act upon in order to issue a citation or effect an arrest. Most callers that call into the dispatch center usually have minimal information, that they're able to generally tell us where the fireworks are, but it's more often than not, there's not a whole lot of information that helps us get to that. And as such, these types of calls compete with our standard call volume, such as emergencies. So they don't always register as high priority calls. So many times we get there, the offenders are already gone. During the holiday, we have actually put out a number of PSAs and social media posts about discouraging people from calling 911 to report fireworks, as this line is typically meant for emergencies. We do mention that if something is on fire or if somebody is injured, that 911 is definitely the appropriate place to venue to call for a police officer. Officers are often dealing with large crowds, And when they come across a fireworks demonstration, many times there are parties where there are several people or even dozens of people, some of which may be intoxicated, they may be uncooperative, they may be hostile towards the officers. So this is definitely a safety concern for our officers when there are one or two officers contacting a large crowd. And during the holiday, we see that the fireworks calls also compete with a number of other things that that take place, and that is that the 4th of July on its own is typically one of the busiest, if not the busiest day of the year. And we are out there dealing with crime trends, DUI enforcement, and then our additional resources are now allocated to the Fireworks by the Sea event at the Channel Islands Harbor, which draws tens of thousands of people each year. And we have a significant number of officers and support staff that are assigned to that venue every time. So overall, we have some challenges actually helping manage the expectations for what our public thinks the police department should be doing to address fireworks versus what may be actually practical or legal. Next up, this is a look at our call for fireworks trends. Now, the blue line refers to the number of specifically related to fireworks calls between the Memorial Day weekend and the 4th of July. And you can see 2020 was a definite outlier for a number of different reasons, but you can see that the trends have kind of reverted back to pre-2020 numbers. You can see that the numbers to calls to our police department's dispatch center on the 4th of July. Now, this is all calls of all sorts into our communications center on the 4th of July is elevated, but it is relatively constant. Each season, when we start the fireworks mitigation effort in our campaign, it becomes a team effort between PD, the fire department, and code compliance. And between us, there are news releases, there are social media posts and PSAs talking about trying to gain some compliance, trying to inform people about the impacts that it has on people and on animals, as well as some of the consequences that are available or that occur for possessing or using fireworks. We deploy message trailers, and we've also, for many years, have operated a tip line with an email line in which we will accept information from people and treat it as anonymous. And as such, what we will do is when we receive this information, we will also mail warning letters to the locations that have been identified by our community members as being involved in fireworks, hoping to stave off or discourage future activity there. But also, with that said, those houses and those locations now are on our radar for the enforcement portion of the holiday season. And speaking of enforcement, here's how we choose to deploy our resources. As you know, we have limited resources and we cannot possibly put a police officer on every block, on every street in the city. So as such, what we do is we collect data and we look at the trends. We look at the densities and the areas of higher incidence of the fireworks usage. And so this map here is a depiction of what has occurred between June 1st and July 5th of this year. And so you see these areas that are darker in red. These are areas where fireworks are more frequently and commonly reported. So that might be an area where we would spend a little more time and have a greater probability of successful enforcement. On the terms of enforcement, I want to point out this chart here. Is that these are the total number of fireworks citations that our department has issued each season. You can see in previous years, we were at just under 5 dozen per year, and years before that are about that. 2020, 2021, and 22, there was no fireworks at the sea event at the harbor. That was on a hiatus for some time. And when we restored that event this year, we did redivert a number of resources that would have been allocated to fireworks enforcement back to this event. Like I said, officers are there doing traffic control and crowd management for the best part of the day. And so they're not available for fireworks enforcement. So the numbers are, other than that, we generally issue about 6 citations per year, which I will tell you, in comparison to many agencies, is a relatively higher number. And I will say that no matter how many citations we were to write, if it was 54 or if it was 1,000, it still might not be enough to address the problem. So as we close out this presentation, I would just like to take a moment to thank these two gentlemen for their service to our department. Commanders Alex Arnett and Commander Tim Kelly are both retiring from our agency. Alex Arnett had his resolution with the council at the last meeting in July, and you'll be seeing Commander Kelly's resolution in an upcoming meeting very soon. Both have served our department since 1996, and I would like to sincerely thank them for their service to our community. This concludes my report, and we will be available for questions moving on from here. Thank you very much.